You mentioned something really interesting because you mentioned this hurt, but you also mentioned violence. And in my experience, I've been trying to expand to people this concept of what is violence and where does it happen, and also in terms of reflecting of violence among women to receiving, giving. I also think of violence towards the self.
Yes.
Right, because sometimes some people ask me a question, how do you maintain a sense of heart through certain traumas or certain, and I think, well, for me, a manifestation of that depression just felt like violence turned inward, and it was this fog. So do you find, like, when you talk about violence, are you in spaces that have expanded the boundaries of that meaning, or are you contributing to that expansion? Because I'm not in spaces that often where people think of violence in a very specific way. But also how, there's also other definitions of violence, interpersonal, towards the self, domestic, international. There's a lot of definitions of that. So
and I definitely feel as if I am expanding how we understand violence by exposing the nuances and the subtleties of violence. I look at violence as harm, as impact. I look at how we're being hurt, and often the most intense kinds of violence we experience is the violence we do to ourselves.
Yeah, I know.
And that's people don't want to go there.
Did you hear that? Like the violence that we do against ourselves. That's a hard place to go.
Yeah.
That's a hard place.
It's a hard place to go, and it's Sunday night, and we're gonna have church, and we're gonna have real talk. It's like the people who are enacting the most harm in the world are doing even far worse harm for themselves. Or they were born into a context, or they were informed by a context that really taught them to be really violent towards themselves. And that's really so much of the circumstances many of us struggle with. We're born into families, we're born in communities, and we have these circumstances, and we do the best that we can. Adolescent development is really tricky. There can be any kind of force or anything that can interrupt like a balanced, healthy adolescent development. And it's really fragile, and so we're all like struggling to manage these adaptations, from trauma that we've incurred as we've grown up. And some people do well with it, some people not so much. Right. So when I see people just really like out of control, like I just say, okay, there's at some point you weren't loved. Or at some point, and I want to bring that kind of empathy and also that kind of compassion to my relationships with people, especially with people that I'm hurt by. And I just want to bring that awareness and say, like, you're probably doing the best that you can right now. And yes, it's creating this really negative impact, but I want to acknowledge that. But as I acknowledge that, I also want to create boundaries. For me,
that's self-actualization 201. I would say.